The sky over the Arizona Territory burned low and red, heavy with dust and heat. Thunderheads crouched on the horizon, but the land was dry as bone. Lara McAllister squinted against the light, her face stung by wind and grit as she urged her Palomino mare up the narrow ridge path. A vulture circled overhead. Just one. She slowed her horse. Something was wrong. Down the slope, barely visible through the shimmer of desert heat, was a figure slumped beside a gray stallion. The animal stood still, loyal or maybe just confused. As Clara approached, her stomach turned not from fear, but that quiet dread that comes before something you can't take back. He was barely conscious, hat on the ground, one leg twisted beneath him, his trousers soaked through with blood. There was a strange stiffness in the air, like the world had paused to watch what she would do. Clara dismounted in one swift motion, medical bag in hand. The man's chest moved, shallow but steady, clutched his thigh with one bloodied hand, breathing ragged. His skin was sun-dark, his jaw sharp and covered in dust and stubble. "Can you hear me?" she asked, kneeling beside him. His eyes fluttered open, a striking blue, clouded with pain. "Can't feel my leg," he rasped. Clara didn't hesitate. She cut open the fabric with practiced hands, her mind already assessing. Through the layers of blood, muscle, and grime, she felt the edge of metal, bullet deep. "Will," she said firmly. She looked up at the massive gray stallion. The beast didn't flinch, just stared at her as if weighing her soul. "Easy, boy," Clara whispered, gripping the saddle horn. "Help me, help your man." Getting the stranger onto the saddle was a feat of pure grit and leverage. He groaned but didn't scream. Once she had him draped across the horse, she mounted behind him and rode hard for her cabin. The ride was brutal. He drifted in and out of consciousness, his head lolling against her shoulder. Every few minutes she spoke, low and steady, as if her voice could tether him to the world. "You hold on, Marshal," she murmured once, not sure how she knew. She just did. "You don't get to die today. Not out here." Cabin came into view as the sun sank into the mountains. A humble structure nestled at the edge of the high desert, not much to look at, but built strong. Clara whistled. Sharply, Tomas appeared from the barn, rifle in hand. "Señorita Dios, who is that? Wounded, gunshot. Help me get him inside." They half-dragged, half-carried the man into Clara's small bedroom. He was unconscious now, his breathing uneven. Tomas hesitated when he spotted the Colt revolver holstered at the man's side. Looks like he brought trouble with him. Clara dropped her bag onto the table, fingers already reaching for bandages and whiskey. "We treat whoever rides to our door, you know that." But she froze when Tomas pulled back the man's vest, a silver badge. U.S. Marshal. Her pulse jumped. "Well," Tomas muttered. "That explains the bullet." Clara said nothing. Her mind was spinning. A marshal bleeding out on her bed. A name she didn't know. A wound that could kill him by morning. She poured the whiskey onto the forceps, hands steady, even though her stomach wasn't. "Boil water, bring my lamp, and hold his damn leg down if he wakes up." An hour later, Clara sat on the blood-streaked floor beside her bed. The bullet lay in a shallow dish like a cursed coin. Eli Tucker Shea had found his name in a folded paper inside his coat, still breathed. But barely. Fever would follow. Infection, maybe worse. She covered him with her mother's old quilt. Outside, coyotes howled under the rising moon. In the flickering lamplight, she studied his face. He was untealed, no more than 30. Lines at the edges of his eyes told of years. In sun and wind, a man who had seen things, fought things. Why had a federal marshal come to Coyote Hollow without backup? Why did someone want him dead? Clara didn't know. But whatever it was, it had followed him into her life now. And she had just thrown herself in the middle of it. As if in answer, Tucker stirred, his voice cracked and low. "Warn them, before it's too late." "Who?" Clara whispered. "Please." Hand twitched weakly. "Your father." Clara's blood turned cold. She stood slowly and turned to Tomas, who had been watching silently from the doorway. "Keep watch. If anyone rides up tonight, you shoot first." He nodded. "And you?" She grabbed the badge, the bloodied coat, and the sealed letter she'd pulled from Tucker's saddlebag. I'm going to figure out what the hell this man nearly died for. She stepped outside, into the cooling desert air, under a sky thick with stars and danger. You're not dying on my land, Marshal, not if I can stop it. The cabin was quiet, too quiet. It's a kind of silence that wrapped around you tight and didn't let go. Clara sat at the edge of the bed, elbows resting on her knees, staring at the man who'd nearly bled out in her arms a few hours ago. Marshal Eli Tucker. The name alone carried weight. The kind of weight that brought law or fire, sometimes both. His breath was shallow, his skin damp with fever. His leg was bound tight in fresh linen, soaked with whiskey and tincture of myrrh. The worst of the bleeding had stopped. The bullet now lay in a metal tin beside her basin, a jagged thing that had nearly taken his life. She had slept. Really. Just listen to the wind, to Tomas stepping softly outside, into Eli's broken murmurs in the dark. Half-coherent names. A place, Santa Fe. Judge Holloway, too late, and once very clear, McAllister. That one made her heart stop. Now, with the morning sun leaking in through the slats of the wooden shutters, she opened the letter they'd found tucked inside his coat.
Oh, dear.
Her fingers were stained from the blood on the envelope. It was addressed to the Territorial Marshal's office, Santa Fe, but the name scribbled across the corner, barely legible, read, Dr. Samuel McAllister, her father. The same man, currently back in Coyote Hollow, running the clinic and treating the miners, ranchers, and drunkards like he had for 2 decades. The man who had trained her to suture wounds at 12, pull teeth at 14, and set broken bones. By 16, Clara read the letter once, then again. The words didn't change. There was a list of witnesses for names. Her father's at the top. All set to testify before a federal judge about corruption and murder involving the town's mayor, the sheriff, and someone high up in the Territorial Land Commission. The kind of testimony that would get a man killed, someone had already tried. Tomas stepped inside, his boots scuffing the floor. I made coffee, he said, then added, Did you read it? She nodded. It's worse than we thought.
Us.
Tomas leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. He didn't ask what she meant. He'd known Clara since they were kids, had been with her through her mother's death, her father's long absences, and the quiet fury that came every time someone underestimated her. I think this marshal was coming to warn him, Clara said softly, or maybe escort him to Santa Fe. Tomas nodded toward the bed. He's lucky you found him. Lucky, she snapped. He was ambushed, shot, left to die in the middle of nowhere? And now my father's name is on a list with a target painted on his back. Tomas didn't argue. Eli stirred, a soft groan. His head shifted against the pillow. Clara was beside him in an instant, pressing the back of her hand to his forehead. Fever's climbing, she murmured. His eyes cracked. Open still, that intense blue, but unfocused. Water, he whispered. She held the tin cup to his lips and watched him sip. Letter? He asked, voice scratchy. I read it, she said. And you need to explain what the hell is going on. He swallowed, then winced no time. You have to warn your father. If they know I was coming, they'll go after him next. And tell me who they are. Eli tried to sit up. Failed. His jaw clenched. Sheriff Caleb Dorsey. Mayor Silas Rudd. And someone in the land office name not confirmed yet. They've been forging land grants, stealing claims, killing witnesses. Your father treated Juan James Blackstone. Should have died in a mine collapse, but turns out it was a bullet. Sheriff's bullet. Clara's breath caught. He brought Blackstone in late one night, said it was shrapnel. He never told me the truth, because he knew what it would mean, Eli rasped. That he'd be dragged into it, but he sent a letter anyway. To Judge Holloway. That's why I was sent. To escort him to Santa Fe? Eli nodded once, and the others, but someone tipped them off. I didn't even make it to town before they put lead in my leg. Clara sat back, heart racing. Then they know you're here. Maybe not yet, Eli said. But they will, and when they do, they'll come. A chill ran down her spine. The cabin, isolated and tucked into the foothills, suddenly felt like a noose. Tomas broke the silence. I'll go to town. Warn your father. Bring him here. No. Eli snapped, eyes sharpening with sudden clarity. They'll be watching the roads to the clinic. Anyone close to McAllister is at risk. Clara stood, then, what do you suggest? Sit here and wait to get burned out. Eli's eyes met hers. You ride tonight? Head south. Los Saloons. Find Marshal Navarro. Tell him what's happened. He'll know what. To do that 30 miles, Tomas said. Through Apache country? I can make it, Clara said flatly. And I speak enough Apache to pass. My mother taught me. Eli grimaced. You sure? She was already gathering supplies. No, but I'm not letting my father hang for telling the truth. Tomas handed her a revolver, her father's old army sidearm. You know how to use this? Clara checked the cylinder. I will if I need to. Eli caught her wrist before she left. His grip was weak, but his gaze was strong. You get there, you find Navarro. Let him tell him the list isn't secure. There's a traitor in the marshal's office. Clara's throat tightened. Is that why you didn't bring backup? Eli's voice dropped. Didn't know who to trust. She nodded, strapped the gun to her hip, and looked once more at the man she had pulled from death. I'll be back by sundown tomorrow. Keep breathing, Marshal. She stepped outside into the growing dusk, the desert wind brushing her hair back like a whisper. Behind her, Eli let out a shallow breath and whispered into the empty room. Come back alone, Chica, or not at all. The sun had barely crested the mountains when Eli Tucker opened his eyes again. His leg pulsed with pain like a hammer beating against bone. He tried to move, but it sent a firebolt from his thigh up to his chest, knocking the breath from his lungs. He bit back a groan. The cabin was quiet. Clara was gone. She'd left some time during the night, and by the position of the light cutting through the slats, she'd been gone a while. He remembered her last words, the grip of her hand around his, and the determined set of her jaw when she said she'd be back by sundown. If anyone could make it through Apache territory to Los Solanos and back in one piece, it was her. He didn't know how he knew that he just did. He reached for the canteen beside the bed, hands trembling. His body was weak to weak, and that wasn't going to change fast. The door creaked open. He tensed, but it was only Tomas, stepping in with a rifle slung over his shoulder and a mug of something steaming in his hand. Oh, you look like hell, Marshal, the man said in a voice as dry as the high desert wind. I feel worse, Eli muttered, easing himself upright with a wince. Tomas set the cup down on the table. Broth from Clara's recipe. Smells awful, but it'll keep you alive. Eli managed a nod of thanks. He sipped slowly, trying not to spill. The movement alone made his head spin. How long's she been gone, he asked. Tomas checked the light through the window. Left just after midnight. She'd be halfway there by now if nothing slowed her. She's alone, Eli said through clenched teeth. Damn it. I should have. You were half dead and missing a pint of blood, Tomas cut in. You weren't going anywhere but the grave. She knew that. Eli didn't respond. He hated it, but the man was right. He hadn't even been able to sit up without blacking out 2 hours ago. But still, every second Clara rode. Alone through dangerous country felt like a noose tightening around his lungs. You trust Navarro? Tomas asked suddenly. Eli looked at him sharp. I do. Even when you said someone tipped off your escort? Eli's gaze dropped. Navarro wasn't part of that plan. We split up for that exact reason. We knew there was a leak. Tomas leaned against the wall, arms crossed. What happens if Navarro's been compromised too? Eli looked down at his bandaged leg. The pain had dulled to a steady throb, but he could feel heat rising off the wound. Fever? He had to stay sharp. Then she won't make it back. Silence fell again, thick and uneasy. Tomas shifted, then walked over to a saddlebag sitting near the door. I went through this last night. Didn't want to, but Clara would have done the same. Found this tucked in the lining, pulled out a folded paper and handed it to Eli. Eli opened it slowly, a second list. Not of witnesses, but of names tied to the land fraud. Most were officials, clerks, surveyors, railroad. Men, but one name made the blood drain from his face. Deputy Marshal Curtis Langford. Son of a bitch, Eli whispered. Tomas noticed. You know him? Worked under him for 2 years out of Fort Craig, Eli said, voice low. He was in the room when we planned the extraction. I told Holloway I had doubts about him, but we didn't have proof, and now.
We've got
Eli leaned back against the headboard, eyes unfocused.
Ow!
Langford was smart, careful. If he was the leak, then Clara was in even more danger than she knew. She wouldn't just be riding into Apache country. She'd be riding into a town where the law couldn't be trusted. We need to warn her, Eli said. Tomas shook his head. Unless you got a telegraph hiding in your pocket, we... Eli struggled to sit straighter. I need to write something. If she doesn't come back, if Navarro has any doubts, he'll need to know the list was real. And that Langford's the leak. Tomas pulled over a small table and set a pencil and paper in front of him. The words came slowly, each one etched in sweat and pain. By the end, Eli's hand shook so hard he could barely hold the pencil. He sealed the letter and handed it to Tomas. If Clara doesn't make it back by tomorrow morning, you ride for the mission at Mesa Crossing. Navarro knows the place. Hand him this. Don't stop. Don't talk to anyone. Tomas took it and tucked it inside his shirt. I'll do it. Eli sagged back, his body slick with sweat. She's got guts. More than most men I've ridden with. Tomas gave a thin smile. She always did, even as a kid. Used to pull rattlesnakes out of our woodpile with a stick. And a smirk, Eli chuckled, then grimaced. God help whoever tries to stop her. Tomas stepped outside, leaving Eli to rest. But rest didn't come easy. His body was burning up, the infection taking hold fast. He drifted in and out of shallow sleep, haunted by memories he couldn't quite hold down. Gunfire in the hills, a man screaming, blood in the dust. Too late, someone whispered. He jerked awake to the sound of hooves. Fast and close. He fumbled for his revolver and pushed himself up enough to look through the front window. It was in Clara. 2 riders, dust-covered and armed, reined in at the edge of the property. They didn't knock, Eli shouted, voice hoarse, Tomas. But Tomas was already out the back door, rifle raised. The men approached slowly, scanning the cabin with wary eyes. We're looking for a marshal, one called. Name a Tucker. That you in there? Eli said nothing. The man smiled. We got a message for you. From Deputy Langford. Eli's blood turned to ice. Tell him we said hi, the rider added, then tossed something onto the ground. It bounced once and rolled. Metal star split down the middle, dented and burned. Langford's warning, 2 men turned and rode off without firing. A shot, Eli sank back down, his chest heaving. So they knew where he was. That meant Langford was already moving in Clara. Clara was riding straight into it. His throat was raw, but the words came anyway, thick with fear and fury. She tightened her saddle. If you can't ride, I will, he closed. His eyes whispering her words like a prayer, because if she didn't make it back, the whole territory would burn. And so would he. The desert night wasn't quiet, it was alive. Every cricket chirp, every shifting grain of sand beneath her mare's hooves, every breath Clara took felt sharp and loaded. Moonlight pooled in the dry creek beds like quicksilver, and shadows stretched long across the sandstone hills. She kept low in the saddle, her father's revolver strapped tight to her hip, and the letter from Marshal Tucker tucked inside the inner lining of her coat. Her eyes stayed ahead, but her ears swept the darkness like a broom. The first 10 miles had passed without trouble, but she knew better than to believe the rest would be that kind. This wasn't a ride, it was a gauntlet. Coyote Hollow was long behind her now. The desert here was thinner, the hills more jagged. Scrub brush and mesquite trees broke the view like twisted scars across the land. Somewhere far to the east, coyotes called to one another sharp, high howls. That echoed through the rocks, but they weren't what worried her. She rode through a dry wash and let the mare drink at a narrow pool barely left from spring rains. She dismounted, crouched low, her knees aching, her hands dipped into the water. Cool relief even. As her knuckles stayed stiff with tension, she closed her eyes. Just for a second. The silence around her was brittle, false, A twig snapped. She was up instantly, revolver in hand. 3 riders emerged from behind the mesquite, horses moving slow but steady.
Ow.
No dust trail. No noise. Too practiced. 2. Smooth. Her heart slammed once, twice. Then she took a breath and forced her hand to steady. "Oh well," said the lead rider, a tall, scar-faced man with a pockmarked face and a too-smooth voice. "That's a mighty fine mare you got there, miss." Clara didn't lower the gun. "She's fast and she kicks like hell." "I wouldn't get close." The man chuckled. "We ain't looking for trouble. Just wondered what a woman's doing riding alone this deep into nowhere." The second rider, a woman with hard eyes and a wide-brimmed hat, tilted her head. "That bag you're carrying? That a medical satchel?" Clara's eyes flicked to the saddlebag, her mistake. She'd forgotten to remove it. She cursed inwardly. "I'm a midwife," she said smoothly, "heading to Los Saloons. Blacksmith's wife is about to drop twins." The third rider hadn't spoken, young twitchy eyes flicking around too much. He kept one hand near his holster. Watching Clara like a hawk watches a rabbit, Scarface smiled again. Funny, thought the blacksmith in Los Saloons. Was a bachelor? Clara didn't blink. He is. But his mistress sure ain't. That earned a grin from the woman. But no one laughed. The third rider finally spoke, his voice low. "I heard someone patched up a wounded marshal north of here last night. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that?" Clara's gut twisted, but her face stayed even martial. "Haven't seen one in weeks." "You sure?" The woman pressed, urging her horse forward a step. "'Cause rumor is, he was headed to Coyote Hollow. Got jumped before he made it, shot in the leg. Someone pulled a bullet out, someone real handy with a knife." Scarface leaned on the saddle horn. "You look like you got steady hands, miss." Clara raised her revolver a notch, and a faster draw than I look. A beat of silence passed. Then the third rider said, "Search her bag." Scarface nodded. Clara didn't think. She moved. Her hand snapped down to the reins as she vaulted onto her mare in one smooth motion. She spurred the horse hard, right through the creek. Water sprayed up into the riders' faces. Her mare leapt the opposite bank and tore off into the brush. Gunfire cracked behind her. One bullet whined past her ear like an angry wasp. Another sparked against the rocks. The mare didn't slow. Clara ducked low, the reins tight in her fists, heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't look back. Branches clawed at her coat. Thorns snagged her skirt. But she kept going, weaving between cacti and over dry arroyos. She heard the riders behind her, the thud of hooves, the shouted curses. But they were farther than they wanted to be. Her mare had speed, but not forever. She needed an edge. She turned west, into a narrow canyon she'd scouted once as a child. It was tight, dangerous if you didn't know the switchbacks. But she did. The canyon swallowed her whole. Darkness wrapped around them. Moonlight barely touched the bottom. She pulled the mare into a slide behind a rock outcropping. Breath ragged. Silence. Then a shout. Distant. Split up. "She's headed to Los Saloons." The echoes faded. She waited 5 minutes. 10. Then she moved. The rest of the night was blur and grit and fatigue. Her mare began to stumble near dawn. Clara slid off and walked alongside her, whispering calm into the animal's ear. When the sun finally crested the eastern ridge, she saw the distant outline of Los Saloons, just a shimmer of rooftops and a spire of a church steeple piercing the sky like a blade. She made it to the outskirts just past sunrise. The town was already awake. Wagons creaked down the main road. Chickens squawked in narrow alleys. She tied her mare behind the general store and slipped around the back entrance of the Wayfarers Inn, the place Marshal Tucker had told her to go. She entered through the kitchen. The cook cursed at her, then froze when she showed the badge from Tucker's coat. "I'm looking for Marshal Daniel Navarro," she said. The man pointed wordlessly to his staircase. The innkeeper met her on the landing. "Don't know anyone by that name," he said, eyes wary. Clara dropped her voice. "Him I have a message from Marshal Tucker." The innkeeper went still, then nodded once. 10 minutes later, a man emerged from the back hall. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark eyes that didn't miss a thing. Wore no badge, but he moved like a man who carried authority in his bones. "Name's Navarro," he said. "Let us talk." She followed him upstairs. Behind a locked door, she handed him the letter, explained everything. The ambush, the bullet, the warning. When she finished, Navarro looked grim. "Elling Langford," he muttered. "I had my suspicions." He said, "Someone in the marshal's office is leaking information." Navarro nodded that. "D.B. Langford. He's been pushing for assignments in key cases for a while now. If he's dirty, he's not working alone." Clara leaned forward. "My father's still in Coyote Hollow. They'll come for him." "We ride within the hour," Navarro said, standing. "But not the main road. We'll take the foothills, circle back under their noses." Clara's legs trembled with exhaustion, but her voice was steady. "I am going with you." Navarro studied her for a long moment. "You got steel, Miss McAllister. Tucker's lucky you found him." "I didn't just find him," she said. "I saved him." Navarro cracked the barest smile. "Then let's make sure he was worth saving." They moved fast. Within minutes, Navarro had gathered for deputies' plainclothes, armed, ready. Clara ate what she could, downed a cup of strong coffee, and mounted up. As they rode out of town, she thought about Eli back at the cabin, fevered, wounded, vulnerable. She thought about the way he'd looked at her when she left, like she was his last shot at turning the tide. She just prayed she wasn't already too late. She holstered the gun. "Then we don't stop until it's done." Claire had barely closed her eyes when the wind shifted. It came like a breath down from the rocks, hot and dry, and full of warning. The desert didn't whisper, it hissed. And Clara McAllister knew the sound of danger when it slithered through the sage. Navarro and his deputies rode a quarter-mile ahead, scouting the narrow trail that cut through Dead Man's Pass, a rocky ravine just east of the Sand Hollow cliffs. Clara stayed behind with the pack mule, her muscles sore and mind ragged. With fatigue, she'd been riding since the night before, and her body felt like a cracked pot straining to hold water. But there was no stopping now. The sun was climbing, and with it came the risk of exposure. If Sheriff Dorsey's men were tracking them, and she knew damn well they'd pick this pass for an ambush. High walls, few exits. No trees. She squinted ahead. Navarro's shape dipped behind a boulder and didn't reappear. Clara slowed her mare. The silence was too thick, and gunfire. It echoed sharp and sudden, bouncing off the stone like the sound of bones breaking. Clara kicked her horse forward without thinking. She crested the ridge to find two of Navarro's men, exchanging fire with shadows perched high above the trail. The third deputy was already down, blood blooming on his shirt. Navarro had taken cover behind a fallen log, firing carefully between rounds. "Clara, fall back," he shouted, spotting her. But it was too late. Another shot rang out. Her mare screamed, then crumpled. Clara was thrown clear, her shoulder slamming into hard rock. Pain tore through her collarbone, but she rolled, kept low, crawled behind the mule's corpse now lying between her and the crossfire. Someone yelled from above, "That's her. It's the doctor's daughter." Her blood ran cold. They weren't just after Navarro, they were after her. Navarro's voice cut through the chaos. "Retreat east. Cut through the old mission, go." Clara pushed herself up, half limping, half running toward the notch in the ravine wall. Navarro grabbed her arm as she passed and yanked her toward a narrow game trail only locals would know. They ran, ducking fire, moving fast and hard until the sounds of pursuit faded behind them. An hour later, dust-covered and bleeding from a gash above her eye, Clara stood at the edge of a dry basin and stared at what had once been a holy place, the old mission. Its bell tower had crumbled, and one wall had caved in, but the bones of it still stood. White adobe stained red by sand and time. Wooden crosses weathered by decades of heat and wind still clung to the fence around the courtyard. Clara stepped through the archway and felt the silence swallow her whole. This place had been sacred once. She remembered stories how Apaches had raided the town years ago, and the mission had become a place of both refuge and last stand. Women and children had hidden behind those walls. Some made it, others didn't. She dropped to her knees in the dust, heart pounding. Her body was giving out. She could feel it. But her mind was still locked on Eli, his fever, The wound. The fire in his voice when he said her father's name. Navarro appeared behind her, breathing hard, a streak of blood down his forearm. "You all right?" he asked. "Not live," she said, not looking up. "Your men didn't tea, I know." His voice tightened. He knew the risks. "Someone called out my name," she said. "They knew I was coming. That can't just be Langford." Navarro sat beside her in the dirt. "No, it's bigger than Langford." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded map. "There's an old passage under the far wing of the mission. The sisters used it to move food and medicine during the raids. Leads out past the basin into the high rocks. From there we can reach the back trail to Coyote Hollow. But we'll need to rest first, regroup." Clara nodded absently, but her eyes drifted toward the broken chapel door. She rose slowly, every muscle aching, and stepped inside. Chapel smelled like sun-baked earth and rotting wood. Shafts of light cut through holes in the roof, illuminating old pews and a shattered altar. And standing at the far end, in the shadow of a crucifix long since splintered, was a woman, in black. "Welcome back," she said. Her voice was dry, but not unkind. "Wasn't sure I'd ever see a McAllister step through that door again." Clara froze. "Do I know you?" "You wouldn't remember," the woman said, walking forward. Her face was lined, skin sun-worn, eyes sharp as glass. "But I held you when you were 3, screaming your lungs out after falling from a wagon outside this very place." Clara narrowed her eyes. "And you are?" "Sister Grace. Used to be Nurse Grace Weston before I traded blood for prayer." Navarro stepped into the chapel behind her, gun still in hand. "Easy, Marshal," Grace said. "I ain't armed. And if I was, I'd be aiming past you." Clara stepped forward. "You know about my father, Grace?" Raised a brow. "You think people don't talk in these parts?" "I know he treated James Blackstone after that so-called mining accident. I also know someone put a price on your family's heads. I've heard men whisper it while drinking at the watering holes east of Tularosa." Clara's throat went dry. "Then why are you still here?" "Because I've got nowhere else to go," Grace said simply. "And I owe your father more than I can repay." She reached beneath the folds of her shawl and pulled out something wrapped in oilcloth. A badge, old and faded, but still stamped, U.S. Army Field Nurse Iba Lil Sis. "Your father saved my brother's life after Shiloh. Gave me this when I signed up to follow the wounded west. Told me to use it if the world ever went to hell again." Clara took the badge with shaking hands. "It's there again, Miss McAllister," Grace said. "I'll write at our door." Clara swallowed. "Then help us stop it." Grace nodded once. She moved toward the back of the chapel, pulled aside a half-broken bookshelf, and revealed a narrow stairwell carved into the earth. "Tunnel still usable," she said, "damp and tight, but safer than staying above ground." "Looked at Clara, we move at sundown. Use the tunnel to get through the ridgeline. From there, it's 2 days hard riding." Clara nodded, exhaustion clinging to her bones. "If we don't make it in time, we will," Grace said. Clara looked to the fading light leaking through the chapel roof. Her father was still in that town, still trusting the law to protect him, but the law had cracks, and she was going to fall straight through them if she wasn't careful. "Sister." Grace rested a hand on her shoulder. "If you go back, you better be ready to finish what he started." Clara met her gaze, fire kindling behind her fatigue. "I am." Marshal Daniel Navarro never slept deeply, least of all now. The old mission's floor was hard, and his mind harder still. He sat upright with his back against the crumbling adobe wall, revolver on his thigh, eyes sharp in the blue-gray. Glow before dawn. One deputy had already died under his watch. He wouldn't lose anyone else, especially not her. Clara McAllister lay on the far side of the chapel, wrapped in a worn blanket Sister Grace had scrounged from a locked chest. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow but even. Navarro didn't need to be a doctor to see the toll this journey had taken. She was exhausted, bruised, and running on nothing but nerve. But her hands didn't shake when she aimed that pistol yesterday. She was her father's daughter, no doubt. The chapel doors creaked open. Navarro didn't move. His finger hovered near the trigger, ready. Tomas stepped into the shadows, rifle slung across his back, panting hard, boots coated in dust. He looked like hell. Clara stirred at the sound of her name, her eyes opened, foggy at first, then sharp. When they landed on Tomas, she sat up, heart jumping. "What are you doing here?" "Where's Eli?" "He's alive," Tomas said, walking over. "But it's getting worse. Fever is bad. Infection's trying to set in." "He won't say it. But he's fading." Clara was on her feet in an instant. "Then why aren't you with him? He sent me." "Why?" Tomas pulled the letter from his coat, said if you didn't return by dawn, I was to ride straight to Navarro. Navarro took the letter, broke the wax seal, and scanned it quickly, his jaw tensed. Clara crossed her arms. "What is it?" He met her eyes. Tucker was right. Langford asked the leak. "He's been feeding information to Rudd. In Dorsey, he's probably promised a cut of whatever the land scheme nets once the witnesses disappear." "He's in the marshal's office," Clara said, fury sharpening her voice. "People trust that badge." Navarro nodded grimly. "Exactly why this won't be easy. Langford has resources. Communication lines. He'll know we're coming." "Then we go quiet," Clara said. Navarro raised an eyebrow. "You volunteering for a suicide mission?" "I'm volunteering to finish what your marshal started," she said. "Eli's barely holding on. My father is still in Coyote Hollow, probably being watched. We don't have time for a slow war." Sister Grace entered, arms filled, with dried meat and a canteen. "Then you'll need a new plan, and fast." Navarro folded the letter and tucked it into his coat. "We cut across the ridge, bypass the main trails. I have one more man I trust. Lives near the copper mine outside Rattler's Hollow. You pick him up along the way, ride straight into town from the south." Clara grabbed. "We extract him first, before they move the witnesses. If we don't, they'll vanish. In this case, dies with them." She nodded. It was a long shot. A dirty one, but she'd take it. The next few hours moved in a blur. Grace led them through the tunnel beneath the Missionero. And lo, carved by hand, long before Clara was born. Roots dangled from the ceiling. The air was damp and close. Clara ducked low, her shoulders brushing the rough walls as they moved single file. Navarro led, then Clara, then Tomas with his rifle over one shoulder and torch in hand. Tunnel spat them out into the shadow of a box canyon hidden by brush and rock. Navarro checked their surroundings, then pointed east. "We'll travel fast and light. Grace, you stay here. If we don't return in 3 days, you're dead," she finished flatly. "I'll pray in the meantime." Clara managed a tired smile. "You still believe in that?" Grace looked up at the sky. "Only when there's nothing else left." They rode hard. By late morning, they reached Rattler's Hollow, where Navarro's contact, an older scout named Jeb Cole, was waiting with 2 saddled horses and a face like tanned leather. He didn't say much, just nodded and fell into formation. Clara pushed her myrrh until its flanks foamed. Her mind raced faster than her horse visions of Eli burning up in her bed. Her father with a pistol at his head, and Langford smiling in some backroom office while papers burned and lives disappeared. By dusk, the southern ridge above Coyote Hollow came into view. The town shimmered below like a quiet lie. Nothing looked out of place. No gunmen on rooftops. No burning buildings. Just life pretending to be normal. Navarro pointed toward a copse of trees just outside town. "We set camp here. Move in at midnight." "No," Clara said. "We move now. Too risky. Waiting is riskier." Tomas cleared his throat. "Right? They've already tried to kill one marshal. If Langford knows she's alive, they'll move on the rest soon." Navarro hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but we go quiet." They circled the town's edge, avoiding the main streets, staying beneath sight lines. Clara led them through an old cattle trail her father used when visiting patients outside town. The trail led to a dried-up irrigation canal, and from there to the alley behind the clinic. Clara's chest clenched when she saw the building. Shutters drawn, lights out, too quiet. She tapped the back door, nothing. Then movement. The door creaked open, just enough for a face to appear. Clara. Her father's voice, barely a whisper. "Papa," she breathed. He opened the door and pulled her inside, arms tight around her. "I thought you were dead, not yet." She looked past him into the clinic's back room. Two men sat on the floor, faces pale, eyes wary. "The witnesses, where S the third?" Navarro asked, stepping inside. "Our father's." Face darkened. "Taken yesterday. They said it was for his protection." "I didn't he believe them?" Clara's stomach dropped. "That means they're accelerating the plan." Her father nodded. "Tomorrow morning. There. Moving the rest at dawn." "Then we move now," Navarro said. He turned to Jeb. "Go out the back. Light the fire near the feed shed. Draw their attention." Jeb nodded and vanished into the dark. Clara helped the two witnesses gather their things. Her father packed medical supplies. But just as they reached the supply room, a noise stopped them cold. Boots, front porch. The door slammed open. Langford's voice rang out sharp, arrogant, "Search it. McAllister's daughter is here. The marshal, too." Gunfire followed. Navarro shouted, "Move." They shoved the trapdoor open behind the cabinet and dropped down into the tunnel. Clara helped her father lower one witness, then the next. Langford's men crashed through the hallway above. Shots peppered the walls. Navarro returned. Fire from the stairs, giving them cover. Eli's letter flashed in Clara's mind. He'd known this was coming. She helped Navarro down last. His arm was bleeding, but he waved her off. "It's nothing." The trapdoor shut above them. The tunnel closed in. They ran. Coyote hollowed behind them, all chasing. At their heels, she holstered the gun. "Then we don't stop until it's done." The air in the tunnel was cold and damp, a world away from the blistering heat of the desert above. It smelled of old wood, wet earth, and iron-like, blood and memory. The narrow passage forced them into a single file line, hunched over, hands dragging against the walls for balance. Clara led the way with a lantern. Her knuckles scraped from the fall at the clinic. Every breath felt loud in the silence, every heartbeat like a drum against her ribs. Behind her came her father, then the witnesses, and Navarro taking the rear, his arms slick with blood, his revolver still in hand. Tomas had stayed behind to cover their escape, promising to meet them at the old dairy barn beyond the foothills if he made it out. She hadn't let herself think about whether he would. This tunnel, her father whispered behind her, was built during the raids. "My father helped dig it when I was just a boy." Clara nodded, not breaking stride. "We're using it now to escape a different kind of war." They walked in tense silence for nearly 15 minutes, every footstep echoing like a warning. Clara kept the lantern low, the flame flickering with each step. She remembered coming down here once as a child. Her mother had scolded her for tracking mud into the clinic. So that memory felt like it belonged to someone else now, someone untouched. The tunnel widened slightly, revealing an old storage alcove with broken crates and rusted tools. They paused there. Navarro leaned against the wall, breathing heavy. "You need a rest," Clara said, turning toward him. Bleeding through, he shook his head. "We don't have time. You won't make it out of this tunnel if you pass out." Navarro opened his mouth to argue, then swayed. Clara caught him before he fell, lowering him onto one of the crates. She tore open her satchel and pulled out a clean bandage and a bottle of carbolic. Her hands moved quickly, wrapping his arm, applying pressure. He didn't flinch. That alone told her how bad it was. "I've had worse," he muttered. "I doubt that," she said. He looked at her then, eyes sharper than they had a right to be. "You ever think about becoming a marshal?" Clara snorted. "I've got enough trouble being a woman with a scalpel. Last thing I need is a badge." Navarro smiled faintly. "Too bad. You've got the spine for it." Moved again a few minutes later, the pace slower now. One of the witnesses, a rail worker named Ilias, was limping badly. Clara took his arm without being asked. Her father kept looking back, as if expecting to see boots behind them.
Ow.
But the only sound was the steady drip of moisture from the ceiling and the shuffle of their feet. Eventually, the tunnel began to slope upward. Clara's lantern caught the rough-hewn ladder leading to a trapdoor overhead. She stopped at the base and listened. Nothing. She climbed slowly, pressing her ear against the wood. Still nothing. With a soft grunt, she pushed upward. The trapdoor creaked open into the supply cellar of the old dairy barn, abandoned for years, but still standing. Hay dust floated in the shafts of sunlight slipping through the cracks in the roof. It was quiet, safe enough. She helped. The others up one by one. Navarro came last, groaning as he pulled himself through with his good arm. They collapsed into the straw, breathless. For the first time in what felt like years, Clara allowed herself a moment to sit, stretch her legs, and feel something close to relief. But it didn't last. Elias spoke, voice ragged, that man. Langford, he came to my house once. Said if I talked, my wife would disappear. Clara met his eyes. She's still in town? Elias nodded. Navarro straightened, jaw tight. We'll get her out. You have my word. The other witness called her. A former clerk for the mayor's office cleared his throat. There's more to this. I overheard them in the courthouse. They're not just trying to cover up stolen land. They're funneling money. From the rail project, millions. Federal money laundered through ghost companies. Your father, he looked at Clara. He found the wrong bullet in the wrong man. That's what started it. Clara swallowed. So it was never just about land. It's bigger, Navarro nodded, which means they'll do whatever it takes to keep it buried. Her father sat down beside her. We have to testify, even if it kills us. Clara took his hand at 1T. Not if I can help it. She stood and moved to the barn doors, peering through a gap in the wood. The landscape outside was dry and open. In the far distance, a dark figure on horseback appeared then. Another rider, she said. Southridge. Navarro was already moving. How many? Too far to tell? He turned to the group. We move at nightfall. We'll cut east to the Mesquite Flats, then north. We'll follow the riverbed. Harder to track us there. Clara didn't argue. Didn't have the strength to question anymore. She just needed to keep them alive until morning. Navarro crouched beside her. You've done more than most trained deputies ever would. She shook her head. Not enough. Not until this is over. Nodded slowly, then stood. Whatever happens up there, we don't go back. His words sat heavy between them, the weight of finality clear. Clara looked out over the ridge again. The riders were gone, but the dust they kicked up still lingered. Like smoke in a burned church, night was coming, so was judgment. They rode under moonlight, the world silver and silent around them. The wind had died down, leaving only the sound of hooves crunching over dry grass and the occasional jingle of tack. A Clara rode beside. Navarro, her body bruised and aching, but her focus razor sharp. Every flicker in the shadows could be a rifle barrel. Every gust of wind might carry the scent of blood. Behind them, her father rode with the two witnesses, Elias and Calder, both bundled in spare coats. Hunched low over their saddles, the wounded were quiet. Navarro was quieter. Tomasa Dantí returned, and that silence screamed louder than gunfire. They took the riverbed north as planned, weaving between scraggly willows and pale cottonwoods, moving by instinct and prayer. The moonlit path glowed faintly beneath them, the sand cool and damp from recent snowmelt. They were headed for Safe Bend, tiny outpost where the Federal courier sometimes stopped when passing between Santa Fe and the mining camps. Navarro had a contact there, a Union veteran turned barkeep named Arlo Finch, someone he trusted enough to bleed in front of. If they made it to Finch, they could get a telegraph out, get the witnesses into official custody. If Clara adjusted the weight of her revolver on her hip, glancing over at Navarro. He was pale, swaying slightly in the saddle, jaw locked against pain. You're bleeding again, she whispered. I'll live, he muttered. That's what Tucker said too. Navarro didn't reply. But she saw the guilt flicker across his face in the dim light. The sky began to pale by the time they reached the rocky bluff overlooking the valley. Safe Bend lay below 3 buildings, a windmill, and a telegraph shack barely bigger than an outhouse. Smoke curled from the tavern's chimney. Much smoke. Clara pulled up her horse. Navarro joined her, eyes narrowing. That's a lot of heat for one fireplace, he said. Then he swore softly. Look. She followed his line of sight. 2 riders, standing at the edge of the town, dark silhouettes, armed. Langford's already here, Clara said. Or someone working for him, Navarro replied. They backed the horses behind the ridge, tying them off under the cover of trees. We go on foot, Navarro ordered. Circle behind the stable. Finch has a cellar under the tavern floor. If he's still breathing, that's where he'll be. What about the telegraph line? Clara asked. Navarro grimaced. We send the message after we know the witnesses are safe, not before. Langford has ears in every county office this side of the Rio. Clara nodded, then turned to her father. Take the witnesses down the ridge. Stay hidden. If we're not back in 20 minutes, keep moving east. Her father looked like he wanted to argue, but didn't. He just touched her, arm firm and brief, like he used to do when she was a child, and scraped her knees. She and Navarro crept toward town, the chill air tightening their breath in their chests. Stables behind the tavern were dark but warm. Someone had been there recently. Hay was scattered, and a lantern burned low near the tack wall. Navarro pointed at the trapdoor beneath the old hay feeder. Clara crouched beside it, lifted it open, and whispered, Finch? Nothing. Then, a rustle, a click. Navarro leaned down. It's me, Navarro. The McAllister girl, a pause. Then the door opened wider. Arlo Finch looked older than Navarro remembered. His beard was gray, face lined deeper than before, but his eyes were still sharp. He pulled them inside, bolted the trapdoor behind them, and lit another lantern. You picked a hell of a time, Finch said. Langford's men came through here just before midnight, asked if I'd seen a marshal and a woman doctor. I told him I didn't see nothin'. You lying, Arlo? Navarro asked. Finch shrugged. Thought I was. He glanced at Clara. You're the girl Tucker talked about? Clara tensed. You heard from Eli? Passed through here 3 weeks ago? Said, if trouble ever followed, to trust the McAllister girl and no one else. Said she'd fight like a man and patch you up twice as fast. Clara's throat tightened. He is still alive. Barely. Finch nodded. A telegraph line. Not much, but it'll work. Only one station listens to me regularly, those Judge Holloway's field post. That's exactly who we need, Navarro said. We need a secure message out. Full names, testimony. Witless's Clara pulled the folded letter from her coat, and this. Finch opened it, read in silence, then whistled. This is enough to bring down half the territory's political class. Only if it reaches the right hands, Clara said. Footsteps sounded. Above them, heavy, intentional. Back door, Finch hissed, pointing toward a crawlspace. But Navarro didn't move. He stood slowly, pulling his revolver. Go, he told Clara. Get your father. Get out. What about you? He looked at her, something final in his eyes. Someone's got to buy you time. Clara opened her mouth to argue, but then the trapdoor splintered. A shotgun blast blew through the wood, showering them in splinters. Navarro tackled Finch to the floor. Clara scrambled back, pulling herself through the crawl space into the root cellar, then out the side into the alley. The sun was breaking. Across the hills now, she didn't look back. She ran. Found her father, and the witnesses crouched behind the old mill shed. Blood was trickling from her temple where wood had cut her, but she didn't stop. They found us, she gasped. Navarro's holding them off. We move now. They ran across the valley, toward the horses. Toward open ground. Gunfire cracked behind them, then again. Clara turned once. She saw Navarro standing in the doorway, both guns blazing, and then he was gone, swallowed in smoke and flame. They rode hard, Clara's throat raw from screaming orders, her heart pounding with rage and loss. But they didn't stop. Not once. The last thing Navarro said to her burned like a brand in her chest. If they silence us, they win. Dawn T let them, and she wouldn't T, no matter what it cost. The horses were soaked with sweat and running on fumes, but Clara didn't let up. Not yet. Not until the rise of the hills had swallowed Safe Bend from view, and the gunfire behind them faded into memory if it ever could. The wind bit at her face, and her vision blurred from more than just dust. Every part of her ached. From her temple, where the shrapnel had torn skin, to her ribs where she'd hit the ground, to the part of her heart that still refused to believe Navarro was gone. She'd seen him fall, had seen the flare of gunfire light his silhouette. In the tavern doorway, like something out of a legend, and then nothing. A shape swallowed in smoke. No scream, no collapse. Just gone. But she didn't have the luxury to mourn, not yet. They had made it out. Elias and Calder, the witnesses, were alive. Her father was alive. The letter was intact. And now, she had to finish what Navarro had started, what Tucker had believed she could finish. She was writing point now. Whether she liked it or not, they stopped in a gulch just before midday, where the red rock cliffs cast enough shadow to hide them for a short while. Clara dismounted slowly, knees trembling, and helped Elias down before he collapsed. Calder slid off his own horse and vomited into the dirt, then sat with his head between his knees. Her father moved slowly but steady, the years catching up to him with every hour they stayed in motion. "Clara," he said gently, "you need to rest." She shook her head, yanked off her gloves. "Hey, we've got half a day left to reach the rail depot at Hollow Creek. That's our only chance. You think Langford doesn't know it? He'll be waiting at every road crossing between here and there." "I know," her father said, "but you can't keep going like this." She looked at him, and for a moment she wasn't the woman who'd carved a bullet out of Eli, Tucker's leg with a kitchen knife, or face-down hired guns in a canyon. She was just a daughter, tired, furious daughter, trying not to fall apart. "I don't have a choice," she said. "Navarro died so we could get this far. If I stopped now, it meant nothing." She sat beside him in the shade, unwrapped a strip of jerky, and passed it to Calder, who was finally breathing steady again. "Tell me everything you know," she said. Calder wiped his mouth and nodded. Langford was getting payments through a dummy rail company out of Santa Fe High Wind & Co., supposedly funding track expansion. But most of that money was disappearing into contracts that didn't exist. He gestured toward Elias. They paid men like him to forge land claims on property already owned or in dispute. Then they'd force people out, bury the paperwork, and resell it to the railroad with inflated prices. Clara processed that, jaw tightening, and anyone who tried to speak up, Calder's voice turned bitter, ended up in a ditch, or found guilty of fraud and thrown in jail before they could open their mouths. "My father was their biggest threat," Clara muttered. He knew the bullet that killed that surveyor didn't match the weapon found on the scene. He kept the casing. That's why they came after him. Elias looked up at her, haunted. "I only ever wanted to build track. I didn't sign up for this." "No one signs up for murder," Clara said. "But you're standing here now. That's more than most." They drank water in silence, each person calculating what they'd lost and what was still left to fight for. Clara stood. "We head out in 15 minutes. I know a shortcut through the pass. It'll take us along the canyon wall. No cover, but it's faster." Her father frowned. "You sure it's safe?" "No," she said. "But safe is off the table." They rode again, slower now, conserving the horses. The terrain shifted less flat, more boulders and switchbacks, the kind of country that made every mile feel like two. The sun was hanging low by the time they reached the ridgeline. Below, Hollow Creek shimmered in the distance, barely. More than a whistle stop with a grain mill, a general store, and a telegraph line running straight through. Clara pulled out the spyglass Navarro had left behind and scanned the depot. 2 men stood by the rail station. Clean boots, broad hats, hands resting too comfortably near their hips. She handed the glass to her father. He looked, then passed it back. They re-waiting. Clara breathed in through her nose. "We're not going in through the front," she said. "There's a canyon trail north of town. It'll take us around to the old telegraph shack. If we can get the message sent before they spot us," Calder spoke up. "There's another way." They all looked at him. "When I worked for the mayor's office, we had access to a relay line. It ran from Hollow Creek through the water tower, bypassed the depot entirely. Just an emergency line, but if it's still active, where's the switch?" Clara asked, in the old feed shed. Back of the mill. Clara's brain was already moving. They'd need to send the message, hide the witnesses, and draw Langford's men away all at the same time. She looked at her father. "Need you and Elias to circle the canyon and wait behind the shed?" Calder and I will approach from the rail line. You're using yourselves as bait, her father said flatly. Yes, she replied, because they'll expect me to come straight in. I'll make sure they see me. He grabbed her arm. You're not expendable? No, she said. I'm necessary. There's a difference. The plan moved quickly after that. They split, circled, crept. Clara and Calder crawled through brush until they reached the edge of the rail platform. Our pulse thundered in her ears. Her gun felt heavy. In her hand, the two men guarding the depot were pacing, impatient, not locals. She waited for Calder's signal. Flash of light spun off his watch. She stood up slowly, visible just long enough to catch their eyes. They shouted. Clara turned and ran, drawing them into the alley. Gunfire followed. It was working. She ducked, turned corners, kept moving. Then a single shot cracked the air. She stumbled, not from pain, but from fear. Had someone been hit? She doubled back toward the mill. Then she heard a click, the sound of the relay switch being thrown. It worked. The message was sent. They had what they needed. She sprinted toward the sound of her father's voice. They regrouped behind the mill, panting and wild-eyed, but alive. The lines live. Calder gasped, It's done. Clara didn't smile. Not yet, because the echo of boots on gravel was growing louder again. Langford wouldn't stop until he saw her body in the dirt. She looked east, where the mountains turned violet in the dying light. She gripped her revolver and whispered to herself, They wanted a ghost. I'll give them one. The night swallowed Hollow Creek like a secret. Shadows stretched. Across the dry earth, broken only by lanterns swinging from the depot's porch and the faint orange glow of the telegraph shack across the yard. Clara crouched behind a stack of crates, heart drumming steady and slow, not from panic but from readiness. She knew this wasn't over. Sending the message had been a blow, yes, but not a kill shot. Langford would come and heed. Bring everything he had left, the kind of men who didn't flinch at murder, the kind who smiled while they buried you. She'd counted at least 6 of them in town. 3 near the depot, 2 near the mill, 1 roaming the alleys with a repeating rifle slung over his shoulder and a cold smirk like he already knew how the night would end. But they didn't know her, not really, and certainly not what she'd become since riding out of Coyote Hollow. She turned to Calder and her father, both crouched beside her. Elias was in position out back with the horses. The witnesses had to stay. Alive? That was all that mattered now. What's the plan? Calder whispered, voice tight. Clara checked her revolver. We draw them away, just like before. But this time, we don't run. We finish it. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to be the one to do this, yes? She said quietly. I do. A second later, the whistle of a steam train split the air sharp, high and sudden. It was NT scheduled, which meant either someone had bribed the conductor or Langford's cleanup crew had arrived. Clara rose slowly, walking into the open like she belonged there calm, no fear in her steps. She stood in the center of the rail platform, hands out to her sides, and waited. The first man saw her, then the second, and all of them. They surrounded her in a half circle, boots crunching gravel, guns loose in their hands. Langford wasn't among them yet, but his poison lingered in all of them. They looked smug, controlled, certain. Clara's voice was calm. The testimony's been sent. It's the names, the fraud, the money trail, all of it. If you kill me now, you'll just prove it true. One man stepped forward tall, with a scar down his jaw and eyes that looked like glass marbles. We don't care about truth, lady. We care about stopping the bleed. And what happens when the wound's too deep? She asked. Another chuckled. Then we cauterize. Clara's hand twitched. She wasn't going to. When a draw knot, outnumbered, not exposed. But that wasn't the plan. A shot rang out from behind the feed mill. One of the men dropped like a sack of flour. The others turned, startled. That's when Clara moved. She dove behind a barrel as bullets sparked off the wood. Her father returned fire from the alley, called her flanking wide with his old shotgun. And Elias, God bless him, took 2 more out from the rear with a rifle that had seen better days. Was fast, Violent, loud. When the smoke cleared, 3 lay dead, the rest ran. Cowards were smart enough to know the tide had turned. Clara stood slowly, chest heaving, blood trickling from her scalp where a stray fragment had grazed her. Then she heard it. Boots, a slow clap. Langford stepped out from the telegraph office like he was walking into Sunday Mass. He was dressed too neat for this kind of night coat pressed, hat spotless, a silver chain glinting across his vest. He looked like politics, not war, but his eyes were pure rot, he said, smiling thinly. I was wondering. When you'd finally stop running, Clara didn't blink. Never ran, just circled. Langford's eyes flicked to the bodies. Navarro is dead. Tucker is crippled. The rest of the marshals are scattered across the territories. And that message you sent? You think it's going to matter? It already does, she said. He sighed. You're just like your father. Always thought truth was enough. Clara's jaw clenched. It is. Langford drew his pistol, so did she. Shots cracked at the same time. Hers hit, his didn't. Da-da-da-da-da. He staggered back, hand clutching his chest, mouth twisting into disbelief. He dropped to his knees, then slumped forward in the dirt, blood soaking through his fancy shirt. Clara stood over him, hands trembling, gun still raised. You should have buried us deeper, she said. Because we climb. Behind her, Calder stumbled out, holding his arm, blood leaking between his fingers. You okay? Clara asked. I've had worse hangovers, he muttered. Her father limped forward. What's done? No, she said, chest. Still rising and falling, it started. She turned to the depot. The telegraph operator had come out during the shooting, hands raised. Clara walked over to him. Judge Holloway. Did the message get through? The man nodded quickly. Got confirmation. He's already issuing federal warrants. Said to tell you, don't let the trail go cold. Bring it all. The way to the courthouse. Clara's shoulders sagged with something like relief, but not quite peace. She looked back at the trail behind them. So much death. Navarro Tomas. Men who'd stood between the innocent and the fire. She holstered her gun slowly, then turned to her father. We ride at dawn. He looked at her, tired but proud. Where? She stared down at Langford's body to Santa Fe. To finish the testimony, to put them all on record. You think they'll listen now? She looked back up at him. They'll listen, she said, voice hard as stone, because now I'm not asking. And with that, she walked into the dark, with the sun rising behind her. They should have killed me when they had the chance. The wind howled. Across the high plains as they rode out from Hollow Creek, on peeled over the eastern sky. Soft gold breaking across the dust and ruin they left behind. Clara didn't look back. She couldn't, not after everything they'd lost. Ilias and Calder rode in the center, flanked by Clara and her father. Each of them bore wounds, physical and deeper, but they rode with purpose now. The kind that sharpened when grief met justice. Langford was dead, yes, but the beast he fed still had breath in its lungs. They were heading for Santa Fe, where Judge Holloway waited, where sworn testimony could be given, recorded. Made permanent federal marshals were already moving. Clara had received confirmation via a second telegram just before they left. Protection would be waiting at Fort Union. They just had to get there. It just was never simple in New Mexico territory. By midday, they'd stopped to water the horses near a dried riverbed. Clara crouched near the bank, fingers brushing over a clump of red-stained sand. Not blood clay, but it triggered a flash. Navarro falling in the smoke. Tomas. Never returning. Her jaw tightened. You okay? Her father asked gently, stepping beside her. She nodded. I'm not sure I'll ever be okay again. He crouched beside her. Then Don TB. But finish this first. She met his eyes. I will. They remounted and moved on. That night, they camped near the edge of the Cimarron Draw. The wind had a bite to it, and Clara wrapped her coat tighter, eyes scanning the horizon. Calder had taken first watch, his silhouette hunched over a rifle like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Elias was asleep already, if you could call it that. He twitched often, dreamed loud. Clara didn't sleep, she wrote. By firelight, she scratched out notes, details, timelines, all the fragments of testimony and memory she'd gathered. She knew how cases were won or buried. Details mattered. Chain of events, names, times. She recorded Langford's final words, the location of forged land claims. What Elias had overheard, what Calder had seen signed. She would not let any of it fade. Her father sat across the fire, watching her in silence. Most people would burn letters. Like that, he said finally. Clara didn't look up. Most people haven't bled for them. He nodded, then leaned forward. There's something I haven't told you. She raised an eyebrow. Before your mother died, she made me promise something. That if trouble ever came for this family, I'd let you fight it. Not hide you, not run. Clara swallowed hard. She saw it in you early, he continued. That fire, that refusal to bend, scared me half to death, truth be told. She smiled faintly. You're not alone. They rode at first light, cutting east through the Raton Pass. Snow clung stubbornly to the northern slopes. The road wound narrow and sharp along the ridgeline, and the horses struggled for footing in places. It was the fastest route to Fort Union, but also the riskiest. Midway through the pass, Calder signaled, smoke far ahead, curling up like a warning. They approached cautiously. Clara's heart pounded. The outpost had been attacked. A supply wagon smoldered near the trail. A body lay crumpled beside it, one of the marshals sent ahead, stripped of weapons, badge discarded in the dirt. Ambush, Clara muttered, dismounting. Her father checked the man's pulse, though the pallor of his face said enough. Calder scanned the hills. They knew we were coming this way. Clara turned, voice ice-cold. There is a leak. No, her father said. There was a leak. Langford might have been the source, but if not, he had partners, she finished. Still does. They buried the marshal under a stand of pines. Clara kept his badge. That fort was only hours away now, but something felt off. Clara sensed it before she saw a tan animal instinct honed over weeks of running and shooting and losing. The wind shifted. The silence changed. She signaled for them to stop. Then the shot rang out. A bullet whined past her ear, striking a rock with a shriek. Down, she yelled. More gunfire erupted from the ridge. 3 shooters, trained, coordinated. Clara and her father returned fire while Calder and Elias scrambled for cover behind a boulder. The horses spooked, but didn't. Bolt, thank God. Clara counted rounds, breathing steady, ducking and moving between shots. Her revolver was nearly empty. Her father was bleeding from a graze along his ribs. Then answering shot, from behind the ambushers. One of the men on the ridge spun and fell. Then another. The third tried to run but was stopped by a single echoing blast. Clara froze. That shot. She knew that shot. 8. Footsteps came fast down the trail. A figure appeared, battered hat, long coat torn at the sleeve, a limp in his left leg. About damn time, Eli Tucker muttered. Clara blinked, almost laughed. You were supposed to be dead, she said. He shrugged. So were you. They hugged briefly, quickly, then pulled apart too much urgency for sentiment. How did you follow your trail? Saw the smoke from the pass. Figured you'd need a gun that still works. He looked at Calder and Elias. You got your witnesses? Clara nodded. Judge Holloway, federal escorts at Fort Union. Eli pointed over the hill. Fort is secure. Reinforcements came in yesterday. I saw them moving from the bluff. Clara breathed deeply. They demade it. But as she turned back to gather their packs, she saw Calder pale, staring at the bodies of the men who ambushed them. Pointed to a tattoo on one man's forearm, eagle's claw, with 3 stars. That's a rail enforcer mark, Calder said. These weren't hired killers. These were on the company payroll. Clara's blood ran cold. Then, the corruption goes deeper than Langford, she whispered. Eli met her eyes. You're not done? No, she said. And she meant it. We broke the fence. Now we have to burn the whole field. The gates of Fort Union loomed against the storm-colored sky like the last stronghold. Before a war, not after. Thick stone walls, flags flapping in the wind. And armed guards at the watchtower corners, watching their approach with hands resting near their rifles. It should have felt like relief. Clara McAllister didn't feel relief. She felt something colder, sharper, the kind of stillness before a final storm. She rode between Elias and Calder, both visibly worn but still upright, still alive. Ah! Her father followed closely behind, cradling his side. Tucker brought up the rear, his rifle always at the ready, face unreadable since they left the pass. He'd said little since they found the enforcer tattoos on the ambushers. She knew that look. He was working the angles in his mind, trying to guess how deep the rot went. They dismounted just outside the gates. A young soldier with a clipboard approached. "You're the marshal's team?" he asked, eyes flicking to Tucker, then Clara. "We're the ones who didn't die," Clara said. The soldier looked confused. She didn't explain. He led them through the gates and into the inner yard. Horses were being watered, wagons loaded with supplies. A courier galloped out through the east gate as they passed, dust trailing behind. Inside the command building, Judge Holloway stood waiting near a long oak table stacked with files and federal seals. He was broader than she expected. Not in the shoulders, but in presence. A man who filled the space by sheer force of stillness. "Miss McAllister," he said, offering a hand. She took it. His grip was dry, firm. "These are your witnesses?" he asked. Clara nodded. Elias Jansen, rail worker. Witness to false land surveys and suppression tactics. Calder Rowe, former clerk to the Santa Fe mayor's office. Witness to forged contracts, illegal transfers, and cash laundering. Holloway nodded once. "And the proof?" "And these," she said, placing her notes on the table pages and pages of testimony, quotes, names, times. Judge Holloway scanned the first few lines, face unreadable. Behind him, 2 federal marshals stood silently watching everything. "You've done more than anyone else in this territory in 6 months, he finally said. "I didn't do it alone," Clara replied. "No," Holloway agreed. "But you finished it." Clara stepped back, letting her father guide Elias and Calder forward. They were led into a secure chamber where sworn depositions would be recorded and filed under protection. She exhaled slowly. It should have been over. But then Tucker stepped closer to the judge, voice low. "They sent company men. After us in the pass," he said. "Rail enforcers, branded." Holloway's brows lifted. "You re-sure?" "Positive," Clara added. "We thought Langford was the source. He was just the lid on the barrel." The judge sat back, thoughtful. "That makes things more complicated. How much more?" she asked. "There's pressure from Washington," Holloway admitted. "The rail expansion is high priority. Politicians with pockets to fill. I'm willing to pursue the case, but we'll need more than what you've brought. We'll need a ledger, a name, a financial trail." Calder spoke from the back. "There's one more piece." They all turned to him. "I didn't mention it before, but there's a man in Las Palomas. He ran the paperwork for High Wind & Co., dummy shell companies. Name S. Declan Merritt. Slippery bastard. Likes to play both sides. But he's scared. If you can get him safe, he'll flip." Clara looked to Holloway. "Will that be enough? If his records are clean and he'll testify?" Holloway said, "Then yes, that would end this." "Names on paper speak louder than corpses," Clara nodded. "Then we go get him." "Not we," Holloway said. "You've done enough. They'll send marshals." Tucker stepped forward. "With respect, sir. Your marshals already got ambushed once." Holloway's lips thinned. "She's right," Tucker continued. "Langford's people may be scattered, but whoever's behind the curtain. IS&T done playing. Merritt doesn't trust uniforms. He'll run if he sees them." Clara took a breath. "I can bring him in." Quiet. Holloway studied her a long moment, then nodded. "You leave tonight? Ride light, stay low, bring Merritt back alive." Clara nodded once, then turned to her father. "You should stay? You sure?" he asked. She hesitated, then touched his arm. "You've done your part. You gave me everything I needed." That night, the wind howled again, as if the desert were warning them not to ride. Clara, Tucker, and Calder, patched up and determined, slipped out of Fort Union with minimal gear and one shared goal: Las Palomas sat 3 days south, tucked between bluffs and old mining camps. It wasn't on most maps, and that was the point. It's a kind of place where deals were made in the dark, and no one asked names. They kept off the main roads, sleeping in dry creek beds, surviving on jerky and dust. At night, Clara stared at the stars and thought of Navarro, how he'd trusted her with this when she didn't trust herself. On the second night, Tucker spoke, while they warmed their hands by a fire hidden behind scrub brush.
You really think this ends with
Merritt? No, Clara said. I think it ends when the people who buried Navarro are the ones answering to the law. Tucker nodded. The third day, they reached Las Palomas. It was smaller than she expected, half deserted, its old saloon leaning like a drunk against the wind. Few men loitered on porches, watching them ride in with wary eyes. Clara dismounted and walked into the saloon like she owned it. Inside, it smelled of whiskey and oil. A broken piano leaned against the wall. The bartender looked up, squinting. Looking for someone? He asked. Declan Merritt, Clara said. Tell him Clara McAllister wants a word. The room went quiet. The bartender. Didn't he move then? A voice called from upstairs. You came? Declan Merritt stood at the top of the stairs in a velvet vest and boots too polished for a place this broken. Clara turned to face him. We need to talk. Private, he hesitated, then nodded. Follow me. They climbed the stairs. Clara's hand never far from her holster. Tucker and Calder waited below, keeping eyes on the door. Inside the room, Merritt lit a cigar and blew smoke toward the ceiling. I knew this day would come, he said then. Start talking, Clara said. Before it's your last. He sat down, chuckling bitterly. I've got names, accounts, wire transfers. Every man who signed off on it, I'll give it to you, but not here. Then where? She asked. He stubbed out the cigar and looked her in the eye. Get me out of Las Palomas. Alive? And I'll bring the whole damn mountain down. She studied him, then nodded once. Get your boots, Merritt. Judgment rides at dawn. They rode out of Las Palomas under a slate-gray sky. Declan Merritt hunched in the saddle like a man expecting to be shot in the back at any moment. He kept glancing over his shoulder, twitching at every gust of wind. His confidence from the night before burned off by daylight and dread, Clara noticed. Tucker rode tight behind him, rifle slung, and eyes never leaving the horizon. Calder brought up the rear. Clara took point, guiding them northeast toward the ridge trail that cut across the high desert toward Fort Union. It was longer than the main road, but safe for fewer eyes, fewer places to set a trap. Still, Clara didn't trust safe. She didn't trust anything. They kept a fast pace, only stopping once to water the horses at a crumbling well. Near a collapsed homestead, Merritt stayed jittery, sipping water with shaking hands. Wiping his mouth with a silk handkerchief he pulled from a vest pocket. You always this nervous? Tucker asked. Merritt shot him a look. Only when people want me dead. Well, Tucker said, you're in the right company. Clara watched them, silent. She couldn't afford to relax. Not yet. Merritt had what they needed, but if someone else knew he was out here, they'd never make it back to Fort Union. Tell me exactly what you have, Clara said suddenly. Merritt looked at her, suspicious. Why now? Because if you die on this trail, and we don't know where to find your records, this all ends in the dirt. He stared at her a beat longer, then nodded. I hid the ledger in an old bank safe outside Taos. Abandoned place. Used to be owned by a friend before he drank himself into a grave. The keys hidden in the lining of my saddlebag. You just now decided to tell us that? Calder asked, annoyed. I'm an opportunist, not an idiot, Merritt said. If I'd told you before, you'd have left me and gone straight to the ledger. He's not wrong, Tucker. Muttered, they rode on. By sunset, they were halfway through the ridge trail, climbing into scrubland thick with cactus and mesquite. The wind picked up. So did Clara's unease. She slowed her horse, scanning the hills. Shadows moved to icily up here. The cliffs made perfect hiding spots. Then she saw it smoke. Thin, rising, maybe a mile ahead. She signaled the group to stop. Tucker pulled up beside her, squinting. Campfire, or signal. She said, we go around. They veered west, picking through narrow trails and jagged rocks. The horses grew restless, Merritt's especially. The man had never done real riding. He slipped twice, cursed more than he breathed. Then, as they came around a bend, Clara froze fresh tracks. Boot prints, multiple, recent. She motioned to Tucker. He crouched, studied the dirt, then looked up. 6 men, maybe 7. Armed, moving fast. Clara swore under her breath. They know. How? Calder asked. Merritt looked around nervously. I didn't tell anyone. I swear you didn't have to, Tucker said. They've been watching you for weeks. Probably waited till you left Las Palomas before deciding to clean up the mess. They pushed harder now, driving the horses through dusk, trying to outpace the coming storm. At nightfall, they found shelter in a rock overhang near an old riverbed. Clara lit no fire. They ate in silence dry meat, cracked canteens, nerves. Merritt finally spoke. You know, I didn't want to be part of this. I started with paperwork. Contracts, nothing illegal, just convenient. Convenience doesn't bury men, Clara said coldly. No, Merritt agreed, but it greases the shovel. She looked at him. Still have a chance to do something right. Don T. wasted. He nodded, quieter now. Night passed in uneasy shifts. At dawn, they mounted up again. They were only 2 days from Fort Union, but Clara felt the pressure mounting with every mile. Something was coming. She could feel it in her bones. And then it happened. Midday, crossing a narrow ravine, the first shot rang out. Her horse reared, nearly throwing her. Calder's went down hard, sending him sprawling. AMBUSH, Tucker yelled. Gunfire erupted from the cliffs. Clara dove for cover behind a boulder, dragging Merritt down with her. Bullets chipped stone, kicked up dirt. Calder crawled behind a log, cursing and clutching his shoulder. Blood bloomed through his coat. Tucker returned fire, steady and fast. 3 on the ridge, 2 to the south. Clara peeked up, spotted movement, then fired. 1 man went down. She grabbed Merritt's coat. You stay low. You stay alive. He nodded, trembling. Then, silence. Tucker held a hand. Up. I think that's it, he said. But Clara wasn't so sure. She rose cautiously, eyes sweeping. Then a sound behind her. Click, Merritt, holding a pistol, pointed at her back. Clara turned slowly, heart dropping. You have got to be kidding me, she said. Merritt's hand shook, but he didn't lower the gun. I was going to deliver it. He said I was. But they offered me a better deal. Said I could disappear, start over. You think they'll let you live after this? She asked. Calm now. You reliability? He promised. They lie. He hesitated. Just long enough. A gunshot split. The air. Merritt dropped like a rag doll, the pistol flying from his grip. Tucker stood behind him, smoking revolver in hand. Should have trusted the people bleeding for you, he muttered. Clara looked down at Merritt's body, her expression unreadable. He still had the key, she said. We get the ledger. We finish this. Calder groaned from behind the log. Tell me we're done getting shot at, almost, Clara said. She turned to Tucker. We go to Taz. Get the ledger. Then we ride to Santa Fe and then, he asked. She looked at the trail ahead, eyes hard, steady. Then we walk into court and burn the whole goddamn empire down. Let the ones in suits feel what it's like to bleed. They arrived in Santa Fe 3 days later, covered in dust, blood crusted on their coats, and eyes too tired. For celebration, but they were alive. They had everything they needed. The courthouse sat at the heart of the city like a quiet monument, plain and solid, untouched by the greed that had poisoned the rest of the territory. It was there that Clara handed over the ledger pages thick with names, signatures, account, numbers, backroom deals, written in ink and betrayal. Judge Holloway reviewed the documents with careful, deliberate hands, said nothing for a long time. When he looked up, something shifted behind his stern expression. Not surprise. Not even relief. Resolve. Every man listed here will be called to answer, he said. Federal charges. Open hearings. No more shadows. Clara only nodded. She felt older than she had 2 months ago. Her hands ached in the mornings now. Her heart held too many names. Navarro, Tomas. Too many ghosts walking behind her, quiet, but present. The trial began within the week. Words spread fast. Papers printed names. People came from towns and dust-choked counties just to watch. Langford's name echoed through the hall like a curse, but he was only the first. The ledger cut deeper. It named bankers, politicians, surveyors, enforcersmen in polished shoes who had never once touched a shovel but stole land like it was their birthright. Elias took the stand first. His voice shook, but he spoke with the clarity of someone who'd carried guilt for too long. Calder followed, more steady, but no less haunted. And when Clara herself testified, calm, unsparing, armed with facts and memory, the courtroom held its breath. She didn't embellish. She didn't raise her voice. She just told the truth, and it was enough. Convictions followed. Some ran, some tried to cut deals, some begged for the same mercy they'd never shown. But the tide had turned. Weeks later, Clara stood alone on the porch of her childhood home in Coyote Hollow. The air was thick with pine and silence. Her father was inside, finally sleeping without a pistol near his bed. Calder had taken up work at a printing press in Santa Fe, helping publish government reports. Elias had returned to the railroads, this time with a union badge and a promise in his pocket. Tucker had left without goodbye, just a note and a bullet she recognized from the day Navarro died. Still standing, it read. Clara tucked it into the back of Navarro's notebook, then closed the cover. Justice wasn't perfect. It didn't bring Navarro back. It didn't undo what had happened to her father or the names carved into unmarked graves along the trail. But it was something. It was a line drawn in the sand, a message to the next bastard who thought power gave him the right to take. Stepped off the porch, boots crunching against the dry earth. The sun was beginning to fall behind the hills, gold and sharp, and the wind moved slow across the grass. She walked toward the fence she and her father had rebuilt together. One post at a time. It still leaned a little to the left. She liked it that way. Behind her, life was beginning again, not with noise, not with fireworks, with breath, with silence, with the kind of peace you only earn after you've buried everything else. She reached the gate and paused, looking out at the road. It was empty now, but she knew it wouldn't stay that way. And that was all right, because when the time came when someone else needed defending, when a voice needed to be heard, she'd be ready. Not because she wanted to fight, but because someone had to. She looked up at the sky wide and open, then turned back toward the house. Let them come. This time the frontier fights back.